All right, folks, today we're going to talk about functions in Arduino. So I have set up a Tinkercad example here for us to start with. I set up a button and a photoresistor and an RGB LED. So if you want to play along, you could set those up too. Here in my code section, I have variables up at the top that have things like the pins that I just connected to, and I have my pin modes in setup for those things that I have plugged in. My starting program is really simple. It just runs through the loop. If I press the button, it's going to run through these colors, and that's it. So we're going to make sure it works first. So if I hit start, if I click the button, we see the three colors, and then it stops. If I click it again, repeat as needed. Okay, so all of our stuff is wired up correctly and connected correctly. We can start writing some functions. So Arduino always has two functions. The first is setup, and the second is loop. Those both run every time you turn it on. Setup runs once, loop runs over and over and over again. If we want to make our own functions, we can absolutely do that, and we're going to do that right down here. The first one we're going to make, I'm going to call colors. I start by putting in the keyword void. This means that this colors function is not going to give any value back when it's done running. For now, just accept that, and we'll get to the other possibilities later on. But for now, we just need to say it's not going to give any value back, so we put in void. We need a name. I chose colors. It needs to follow the same naming rules as we follow for variables. I have an open and close parentheses here, currently with nothing inside, and that's fine. And then we have an open and a close bracket because our brackets like to move in pairs. We're going to remember that. Okay, so I'm going to move all this flashing light business that we know works, and I'm going to put it down in that colors function. And then in my if statement, I'm just going to call the colors function. So this should look exactly like it did just a minute ago. The same things are going to happen when I click the button. Instead of doing these commands, it is going to call the colors function. But the colors function is just going to do those commands. So it should end up looking just the same. So if I click the button, there go the colors. All right, but now with a homemade function. Ta-da! Okay, that's basic functions. Next up, we'll do ones that either take in parameters or return values. All right, so the next one I'm going to do for our making functions is take a function that is going to take in a value. And so for this one, I am going to, let's see, I'm still going to have the void keyword because it's not going to give back a number. It's just going to take one in. I'm going to call this one my color. And I need to tell it what kind of information I'm going to give. So I'm going to give it an integer, a number, right? Like this. And it can use that anywhere inside this function. So for this one, I'm going to have it analog right, maybe our red LED to match whatever number I give it. So whatever number I send it, it is going to make that red LED, it's going to analog write that value. So up here, when I call my color, we could test this out and just make sure it's working by giving it a nice integer number that we know that red LED can take. So let's try this out. So now when I click the button, it sets it to 100. Yep, that's about in the middle. Okay, I could also set this to something really low, like 20, to make sure that's working. So now when I click the button, oh yep, just barely turns on. Whereas if I give it 200, nice and bright. Okay, so each time I have clicked that button as an example, When I click the button, it calls the myColor function and gives it whichever number I put in the parentheses here. So when I put in the number 200, 200 is what's passed into this void myColor function. And then it can use that as many or as few times as it needs. So here we're analog writing the red LED to color, which in this case was 200. All right, so that's taking in a value. Now I'm going to write one that returns a value. So instead of void, this one is going to start with int because it's going to give back an integer number. I'm going to call this one read photo. It's not going to take in a number, so nothing goes in my parentheses. Still need a pair of brackets because brackets like to travel in pairs. For this one, I'm going to have it return. Return is the keyword that says which thing it's going to give back when it's done. And I'm going to map, I'm going to analog read our photo pin. And then I know that the photo pin goes from 0 to 1023. And the result that I want is something I can hand to the LED. I know those go from 0 to 255. So there we go. This function, when called, will analog read the photo pin, which is this range, and will map to this range, and then hand that value back to be saved wherever it was called. Okay, so that's what return means. So up here, when I press the button, I have a variable ready to hold this. Photo read is just an integer, and photo read is going to be the result of the read photo function. And then I will use that value and pass it on to my myColor function. Okay, so before I hit play and we try it out, let's make sure we can see what's going to happen. So here in line 26, I'm going to read if the button is pressed. If the button is pressed, I am going to call the read photo function, which is right here, which will go read that photo resistor, map the value, and return it. Because it's returning it, this results in an integer number, which I'm going to save in this photo read variable right here. Now that I have a number stored there, I'm going to send that number right here to the myColor function, and myColor is going to analog write the red LED to the number it was just given. Okay, let's see if it works. If I start simulation, I can make sure, okay, so my photoresistor is way low. So when I press the button, it's gonna get that really low value, map it really low, and indeed my red LED is very low. If I turn this up really high and I press the button, so it's sampling that higher number, mapping it, and sending it to the red LED. Somewhere in between. Oh, that was still pretty bright. Okay. Somewhere in between. There you go. And turn down, and it gets really low. Okay. Pardon? So that is examples of 3 kind of different ways to set up functions. Functions that neither take nor return values, like our colors function. Functions that take in a value, called a parameter, or functions that return a value. Okay, in this case, an integer. You can also make a function that both takes in and returns, and there's some examples of those in our Canvas class, but for now, I'm going to pause this right here. Okay, go make some yourself.